With the Arteon, Volkswagen makes another bid for executive segment credibility. Elegance, comfort and technology are all delivered here, along with 5-door coupe body styling and a surprising level of practicality. If you're looking for something individual and sensibly different in this sector, it's worth a look.
Style is about more than just a badge on a boot lid. Heard that before? Well, you're going to hear it again at your Volkswagen dealer. That's if you show interest in this car anyway. The company's Gran Turismo premium executive contender, the Arteon. Gran Turismo, well, let's start with that. It's an evocative term the industry likes to use for a 4 or 5-door executive segment model with sleeker, coupe-like fastback styling. Now, this kind of body shape, which was much in vogue amongst automakers in the 60s and 70s, was revived for luxury sector customers by the Mercedes CLS in 2005. Then it was taken up by Volkswagen, who in 2008 created a 4-door coupe version of their Passat, the Passat CC, to sell against established prestige brand models like BMW's 3 Series and Audi's A4 in the mid-sized premium segment below. The upmarket aspirations of that design became more credible when it was replaced by an updated model in 2011, merely christened the Volkswagen CC, which is the 4-door car that in 2017 this 5-door Arteon succeeded in the company's lineup. Cynics will dismiss this as a Passat and a pretty frock, but then so is an Audi A4. All of these models share the MQB platform and engine wear used these days in most mid to large sized Volkswagen Group vehicles, but in this case a significant amount of work has been put in to differentiate the end result. It's lower, longer, wider and more expansive of wheelbase than that old CC. So much bigger, in fact, that if you're going to talk market segments, this Arteon is actually closer in size to a full-sized executive car like an Audi A6 than it is to the kind of Audi A4 sector model it's been priced against. Now, this in turn has meant that a lot of the engineering here had to be completely bespoke. The braking and suspension systems, for example, are completely different to those of any other Volkswagen for sale in our market. In short, the Wolfsburg maker's Gran Turismo model is at last very much its own car. As it'll need to be, campaigning in the premium segment with a volume brand badge. The last time the company launched a flagship luxury model with 4 passenger doors tasked with doing this was with the Phaeton back in 2003, and that car was almost universally ignored by potential buyers. Volkswagen's optimistic, though, that with the far more stylish Arteon, things will be different. It's aimed at the more accessible mainstream business market rather than the boardroom sector for a start, and it's priced directly against competitive premium brand 5-door contenders that also feature a similar fastback GT-style look, cars like Audi's A5 Sportback and BMW's 4 Series Grand Coupe. Like other rivals, those two can't match the Arteon for interior space or boot capacity, and they struggle to better this Volkswagen when it comes to media connectivity and safety technology too. So, will that all be enough to get this car onto your wish list? Let's find out. In many ways, the whole Gran Turismo concept rather suits this Arteon. GT motoring is supposed to be about high-speed touring rather than out-and-out sports car driving dynamics. And if you judge this Volkswagen purely on that criteria, you're likely to be quite satisfied with it. Refinement is excellent, particularly with the optional acoustic glass package that we're trying here. But the biggest efforts here have been made in terms of ride quality. Now, the designers were determined that the Arteon should deliver the suspension feel of a proper executive class car. They brought a clean sheet approach to this quest, and necessarily so because the heavier, lengthier version of the MQB platform used in this car meant that springs and dampers couldn't merely be carried over from the Passat. Hence a supple new 4-link independent rear setup with gas-filled shock absorbers and anti-roll bars on both axles. And now ideally this would have been embellished with the option of air suspension, but the development budget just wouldn't stretch to that, so the engineers engineers instead contented themselves by redesigning the off-the-shelf Volkswagen Group DCC Dynamic Chassis Control Adaptive Damping Package to make it air suspension-like. You get DCC as standard when 4Motion 4-wheel drive is specified with this car, but it's also optional elsewhere in the range, and it's an extra very well worth having. Now, as is usual with these kinds of setups, it works through the settings of an existing driving modes package, which normally controls only the steering feel, the throttle response, and the auto gear shift timings. The Arteon's mode system is called Driving Profile Selection, and it gives you eco, comfort, and sport options, plus there's a compromised normal setting. Adding in ride quality changes to these variations makes quite a difference to this car's tarmac demeanour. Select comfort, for example, and you'll notice the manner in which tarmac tears and even quite severe paved undulations are dispatched with disdain. In fact, if it wasn't for the way that really severe potholes and speed humps can occasionally catch the DCC system out, you might indeed really think that this car had full executive segment style air suspension fitted. What we're saying is that this dynamic chassis control package makes more of a difference than it ever has previously on a Volkswagen Group car, which is crucial if the Arteon really is going to get with the whole GT thing. Plus, as a bonus, this revised version of the DCC setup is more infinitely variable thanks to the addition of an extra individual option on the selection screen that allows you to vary the damping feel on a sliding scale offering no fewer than 43 different increments. Yeah, 43. That starts below the regular comfort indicator and goes beyond what the engineers have labelled sport. Will Arteon owners really need such extensive configurability? Well, almost certainly not. Of course, it's useful to have the tools to sharpen things up should the requirement to throw this car around a bit ever present itself. But in an Arteon, you really would need to want to do this, prompted into pacier cornering by lateness. It's unlikely that you'd ever choose to drive this Volkswagen in that manner, in the way that you might do in, say, a rival BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe. I mean, this really isn't that kind of car. For a start, of course, if you do without the top-of-the-range 4Motion option, it's front-driven, unlike the Beamer and unlike other models that potential customers might also be considering, like Alfa Romeo's Giulia and Jaguar's XE. On top of that, the transverse angle at which the engines are mounted in this car, great though that is for releasing interior space, also raises the centre of gravity and pushes weight forward, and that's absolutely the opposite of what you need for cornering agility. Nor does it help that the body shell's greater size in comparison to rivals becomes very obvious on narrower roads. Don't get us wrong, the Arteon is far from being any sort of dynamic duffer. There's a bit more grip than you get in a Passat, even if you don't get yourself a variant that's fitted with the optional XDS electronic differential lock system, which does make it easier to get the power down at speed through tight turns. All of this will help if you find yourself needing to really push on across a twisting secondary route. In that kind of situation, you'll find this car quite happy to work with you once you've adjusted to its rather unusual progressive steering setup. Now, this package, which was originally developed for the Golf GTI, constantly alters the gearing of the steering depending on your inputs, and that's so you don't have to turn the wheel so much to get the required turning angle. The system would be a lot better if a bit more feel had been engineered into the helm responses, but once you get over that and once you work with it, you'll find that it allows this Volkswagen to be turned into corners at speed with surprising precision and directness. The brakes, that's another area of this car that required a bespoke engineering package, are really good too. We should really talk about what's available beneath the bonnet, shouldn't we? If you have plenty to spend, this is a further area in which this Arteon might suffer in comparison to established premium rivals. And that's because even though a 6-cylinder sized power plant of the kind that you could have in a top version of a rival Audi A5 Sportback or BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe will apparently fit into that big engine bay, there's no option to specify one. Well, not for our market anyway. So this this car is limited to the usual 4-cylinder turbocharged TSI petrol and TDI diesel units that you get with virtually every upper market volume Volkswagen model. Now, not long ago, virtually all sales of a mid-sized business-orientated contender like this one would have been of variants fueled from the black pump, which was why back in 2015 the 8th generation Passat was originally launched with an exclusively diesel-powered engine lineup. Today things are a bit different, and going forward up to 40% of Arteon sales are expected to be of the petrol derivatives. There are 3 TSI options here, the lineup kicking off with the downsized 1.5 litre unit developing 150 PS, the only one of the trio that can be had with manual transmission. Otherwise, a silky smooth 7-speed DSG auto box is mandatory. That 1.5 litre TSI engine might be okay in a Golf, but it isn't going to move nearly 1.7 tonnes of Arteon around with much alacrity, so we would recommend that petrol people focus instead on one of the alternative 2-litre units. The 190 PS version of that power plant's nice, and it spirits you to 62 miles an hour from rest in 7.7 seconds en route to 149 miles an hour. If funds permit, though, the top-of-the-range package is better. It mates an uprated 280 PS version of that unit to 4-motion 4-wheel drive as part of a drivetrain basically carried over from the Golf R Superhatch. Plunged into an Arteon, it's enough to see 62 miles an hour flash by in 5.6 seconds on the way to a top speed that has to be artificially restrained at 155 miles an hour. The diesel market, though, still has a lot of life in it yet, and to satisfy buyers here, Volkswagen wheels out the same 3 2-litre TDI engines that you can have in the Passat. The least expensive option is the 150 PS unit that seems to be fitted to virtually everything the Volkswagen company makes. Here it's a few tenths quicker when it's fitted out with the optional 7-speed self-shifting DSG setup than it is in the manual. In auto form, it makes 62 miles an hour from rest in 9.1 seconds en route to 137 miles an hour. The majority of Arteon buyers, though, are expected to choose the uprated 190 PS version of this single turbo unit, which again offers a choice of transmission and in auto form improves those figures to 8 seconds and 148 miles an hour. In this case, we're driving the top diesel variant, the 240 PS 2-litre by TDI model, which comes only with 4-motion 4-wheel drive and that DSG Auto. Here, twin turbos are used to thrust out a lusty 500 newton meters of torque. That's almost 50% more than the entry-level TDI unit can offer, and it's enough to raise the brake towing capacity from its normal 2-ton TDI limit to 2.2 tonnes. Now, you really feel that pulling power when you're overtaking and from rest, where this top derivative sprints to 62 mph in 6.5 seconds on the way to 152 miles an hour maximum. This Arteon apparently ushers in a whole new styling era for its brand. Or as the company's design director Klaus Bischoff puts it, never has there been a sexier Volkswagen. Well, your perspective on that may be different, but most would agree that what's on offer here is a pretty smart piece of penmanship carried over into production almost unchanged from the futuristic prototype that was first unveiled back in 2015 at the Geneva Motor Show. In the words of stylist Tobias Suleiman, it's the face of a new Volkswagen generation. Which means that you're going to be seeing this broad, deep grille an awful lot on future models. It's the widest to ever feature on one of the Volkswagen maker's cars. Its upper crossbars flow into these stylised LED headlamps, while simultaneously using finely integrated LED light conductors to perform the functions of daytime running lights. The lower corner air intakes are framed by boomerang-shaped fog lamps, while further up, the deep contours run into this sports car-like clamshell-style bonnet. It's all very Jag meets BMW, with a hefty dose of serious overtaking presence thrown in for good measure. Move to the side and the size and character of the Arteon become even more evident. Ignore any ignorant colleagues who dismiss this as a prettified Passat. This is quite a different kind of car with quite different dimensions. Let's see it measure 95 millimeters longer, 39 mils wider and 26 mils lower than its showroom stablemate. Those dimensions are almost but not quite enough to qualify the Arteon for full-sized executive segment status, or to put it another way, make it an Audi A6 rather than an Audi A4 rival. It's the shaping, though, rather than the size, that really sets this design apart, particularly this swept-back roofline and the uplighter effect of these sculpted lower panels. Also key is this prominent mid-level character crease that flows through the wheel arch, pauses to emphasise this fender vent style trim panel beneath the door mirror, and then sweeps back above the door handles towards the muscular rear haunches. Now, as with a coupe or a convertible, the side windows here, they're frameless, and the wheel rims are intentionally large. You can swap this model's 19-inch rims for even bigger 20 inches if you want to. Now, viewed from the rear, the dominant shoulder sections of this fastback design are more clearly evident as part of the Gran Turismo styling that's far more rakish and eye-catching than it was with the previous CC model. That was a saloon, of course. This, as you can see, is like obvious GT segment rivals, a 5-door hatch. Its tailgate featuring a sharply contoured trailing edge that sits just above these slim LED illuminated lamp clusters. As usual, more important is the stuff that you can't see, and in this case a considerably lengthened version of Volkswagen's mainstream MQB platform, and that will justify the considerable investment that was needed to create it by in future underpinning much bigger Volkswagen models that are slated for sale in other markets. Time to take a seat inside, where, a little disappointingly, there's far less evidence of fundamental design differentiation from any ordinary mid-level manager's company Passat. It does say a lot for that humbler model, though, that this isn't the issue that it would be with other volume brands, with high-quality materials very much in evidence, build quality from the German factory faultless, and the overall ambiance very much of a premium standard, thanks to the Arteon's classier trimming. Now, yes, it is true that some of the controls can be found on cheaper Volkswagen Group models. We've seen these ventilation dials here in the Skoda family hatch, for example, but none of it looks particularly out of place, and the finishing is pleasingly fashioned. Take, for example, these brushed aluminium inlays that can be, on request, replaced by beautifully tactile striated wood, and the soft, supple Nappa leather upholstery that extends into the doors. As on a Passat, the main thing that catches your eye is this long, slim, mid-level chrome-finned air vent, intended in this case to be a visual reference to the crossbars of the front grille. Now, it extends across the entire width of the interior like a band, interrupted only by the instruments and this smart analog clock in the centre of the fascia. Now, I mentioned the instruments. They're actually virtual dials. This car gets as standard the active info display, which is optional on other Volkswagen models, a 12.3-inch TFT screen that completely replaces the usual conventional gauges with an almost infinitely customizable layout of crystal clear virtual graphics. Now, the customizable bit works around two main things. Your preference in the presentation of the two main dials, which can be configured to show everything from driving data to audio settings, and a display between them which can be separately set up to showcase a whole range of different data, but which looks most sophisticated when it's showing an expandable navigation map. Anything the instrument binnacle can't tell you will almost certainly be covered on or be duplicated by this centre dash infotainment display. Now, unfortunately, primary functionality here is touchscreen controlled. You don't get the kind of rotary dial controller down by the gear stick that makes rival BMW iDrive and Audi MMI systems so much easier to use. Still, the monitor is as effective as it can be in controlling the normal DAB stereo, Bluetooth phone and car informational functions, and it's provided as standard in the form of Volkswagen's usual 8-inch Discover navigation system. In this particular case, though, that has been optionally upgraded to the brand's larger 9.2-inch Discover Navigation Pro display. Now, the Pro package is certainly state-of-the-art. It incorporates gesture control, which allows the common infotainment functions to be activated with just a twirl of your finger. It does tend, though, to be rather fiddly to operate. There's also a 64GB hard drive, a DVD player, voice control, and beautifully detailed 3D graphics. Less welcome is the lack of separate knobs for audio volume and map zooming functions. Now you do get proper physical controllers for these functions with the ordinary 8-inch screen, and as expected, both Discover systems feature Volkswagen's clever App Connect setup. Now this is a starting point for the company's CarNet connectivity system and the key tool for bringing the best functions of your smartphone into your Arteon via the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and MirrorLink systems. Now once this software is activated, you're all set to enjoy things that you maybe never thought you'd be able to access on the move. For example, Apple CarPlay supports the music streaming service Spotify, the video calling app Skype, and Stitcher, which offers a variety of radio shows and podcasts. Android Auto works with a variety of apps, including Instant Messenger's WhatsApp and Kik, and Google Hangouts too. The Volkswagen brand also adds to these with a further range of clever apps that you're free to download. And there's also Volkswagen Media Control, which will allow rear passengers to control in-car entertainment via their phones or tablets. Now, if you've owned a well-specified version of one of the company's modern-era models previously, you might also be familiar with this Arteon's included CarNet Guide and Inform setup, which gives you in-car access to a whole range of useful journeying information. So everything from traffic news, weather and news feeds to information on fuel and parking prices in your place of destination. Technology, of course, is all very well, but it doesn't count for much if the fundamental cabin ergonomics aren't right on the money. From the moment you get in here, though, it's immediately obvious that everything's exactly as it should be in this regard. Although, if you are used to an Audi or a BMW, you might not especially like the way that this superbly supportive Ergo Comfort seat positions you a little higher in front of this 3-spoke leather-stitched wheel. Still, it's useful for maximising rear 3/4 vision, which is better than it usually is on Gran Turismo-style models of this type. And that's despite the narrow rear window and the thick, steeply angled rear pillars. A head-up display is optional, but doesn't feel quite as seamlessly integrated as rival systems because it projects its graphics onto a pane of glass rather than directly onto the inside of the lower part of the windscreen. As for cabin storage, well, there's most of what you'd expect, like this small lidded compartment at the bottom of the centre stack here. That's evidently intended for your smartphone because it incorporates a USB point and provision for wireless charging mat. There is another USB point in this deep lidded box between the seats here, along with an aux in port. Just ahead of that lies a coin tray, and that's next to a couple of cup holder recesses covered by this smart concertina-ing top. There's no overhead compartment for your sunglasses, and the door pockets are small, but the glove box is large, and there's a useful extra compartment down here by the driver's knee. Let's take a seat in the rear. Now, this is another area of the Arteon in which you'll notice a big difference if you happen to have owned the previous CC model. This replacement design being 60mm longer, 16mm wider, and perhaps most significantly 10mm taller. Now this time around that makes it possible for reasonably tall folk to get in back here without a lowering of the head. Once inside, courtesy of the lengthy 2.84 metre wheelbase, you'll find yourself in easily the most spacious rear seat area in the segment. Despite 1.48 metres of interior width, though, it's not suited to the carriage of 3 adults. Gran Turismos never are. The prominently high centre transmission tunnel mitigates against that. You do, though, get standards of legroom that are on another level from competing Audi A5 Sportback and BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe models. And if you take a seat in the back of a rival Jaguar XE after trying this Volkswagen, well, you're going to feel like you're in a Super Mini. The Volkswagen brand quotes a legroom figure of 1,016mm, and that matches what you get from full-sized executive saloons from the next class up that measure over 5 metres in exterior length. As for the swept-back roof, well, as you can see, it doesn't compromise headroom too much. There's 940mm of it, although lankier 6-footers may find themselves brushing the smart headliner. The detail stuff's well taken care of. Take this neat flap here that rises to reveal not only 12 volt and USB sockets, but also a 230 volt port as well. There are also smart ventilation controls, individual reading lights, surprisingly large door pockets, Isofix outer child seat points, and lovely touches like this recessed blue strip lighting in the doors. Heated upholstery is available too, and if you pull down the centre armrest here, there are the usual twin cup holders. Now, if you can't stretch to the optional panoramic glass sunroof, compensation is provided by these rear quarter-light windows that bring in much-needed light to what would otherwise be a rather dark space. So let's finish this segment by taking a look in the boot. Now, we had expected that the tailgate would have been power operated. That's the case with most rivals, but here that's optional. So unless you've ticked that box, activation happens by pushing this centre tailgate badge. Now, your Volkswagen salesperson may well be keen to reference the fact that the 563 litre space provided here is a significant 83 litres more than you get in rival Audi A5 Sportback and BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe models. They're less likely to point out, though, that this Arteon's capacity is 23 litres down on what you'd find in a Passat. Still, apparently up to 8 carry-on suitcases will still fit in just fine. No, you might be able to fit in a little more beneath the floor, despite the welcome presence of a proper full-size spare wheel. Not that you're ever likely to use that, because all the tyres are of the self-sealing air stop variety, allow you to limp to the nearest garage in the event of a puncture without ruining the rubber carcass. There's no 12-volt socket provided here, but you do get a couple of pull-out bag hooks. Plus, there's a latch in the rear bench there, which will allow you to push through longer items like skis, for example, into the cabin. If you need more room than that, then pushing forward the 60/40 split seat back frees up as much as 1,557 litres of total fresh air and more than 2 metres of loading length between the front seats and the boot lip here. Arteon pricing starts at just over the £30,000 mark, rising to around £40,000 for the plushest version of the flagship 2-litre bi-TDI diesel variant. There are just 2 trim options, with this particular car's Elegance spec being your starting point. Most buyers, though, will probably want to find just under £800 more to get the sportier-looking R-Line trim package. More powerful versions of some premium rivals offer 6-cylinder power, but Volkswagen has chosen to stick to its usual 4-cylinder turbocharged TSI petrol and TDI diesel units across the Arteon range. So let's talk you through those. Our petrol people are offered the choice of an entry-level 1.5 litre 150 PS unit and a 2 litre 190 PS engine. Plus there's a further 2 litre 280 PS power plant that comes only with 4Motion 4-wheel drive. Most likely buyers will give those variants no more than a cursory glance on their way to sign up for one of the 2 litre diesels. There is a 150 PS baseline option, but the majority of customers will want to stretch at least as far as the 190 PS version of that single turbo engine, and that's a unit offered with the £1,570 option of 4Motion 4-wheel drive if you want it. The top twin turbo bi-TDI 240 PS diesel that we've been trying here comes only in 4Motion guise. As for transmission, well, with the base 1.5 litre petrol model and the volume diesel variants, there's the option of paying £1,400 more to swap the 6-speed stick shift for Volkswagen's usual 7-speed DSG Auto gearbox. Elsewhere in the range, though, that DSG Auto is mandatory. On to the value proposition. Now, in every aspect of this car, Volkswagen does its best to distance it from its more mundane Passat model, and it does so again when it comes to pricing. Now, where direct comparisons can be made between the two models, you'll find most versions of the Arteon pitched around £4,700 above their humbler showroom stablemates. As for more relevant rivals, well, let's compare these using the most popular Arteon 2-litre TDI 190 PS model as a benchmark, and that's the variant priced from just under £35,000. An Audi A5 Sportback 2-litre TDI with exactly the same engine would cost you around about the same, as would a comparable BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe 420D and another 5-door Gran Turismo style model that we would recommend, the Kia Stinger 2.2 litre CRDI. If in the search for a premium mid-size model, you're not really bothered about the whole Gran Turismo thing, but you still want something a bit different from the usual BMW 3 Series, Audi A4 or Mercedes C-Class that everyone else at your level in your company seems to have, then we'd point you towards cars like the Alfa Romeo Giulia and the Jaguar XE, both of which will probably save you around £2,000 to £3,000 over an Arteon if you're comparing against equivalent models. Do bear in mind though that all the rivals we just mentioned are significantly more cramped than this Volkswagen in terms of backseat room and boot space. If, having considered all of them, you conclude that it is an Arteon you really want, then you're probably going to expect this VW to be better equipped than its premium rivals. Sure enough, even this base Elegance trim gives you plenty of kit. Now, we were a little surprised to find it necessary to pay extra for a powered tailgate, for tyre pressure monitoring and voice activation for the standard infotainment system. Otherwise, though, most of the features that you would expect to find in a car of this class do seem to be present and correct. So let's start with the highlights, and they're headlined for us by the handsome full LED headlamps. These feature washers and they have a dynamic light assist system which dips them at night and which reacts to road conditions and the weather. Plus, they can even predict and illuminate oncoming curves in the road. The beams predict corners using data from the standard Discover navigation system that inside the car is activated via an 8-inch centre dash screen. Now, via this display, you'll also access an 8-speaker DAB stereo system with Bluetooth phone connectivity, a speed limit display, and a whole range of useful driving data. You get an old-fashioned CD player too, which isn't always included as standard on cars these days. And there's Volkswagen's CarNet App Connect package, which allows you to link in your smartphone via the Apple CarPlay, Android Auto and MirrorLink systems. Also standard is the brand's CarNet Guide and Inform setup, which gives you in-car online access to a whole range of useful journeying information. Everything from traffic news to information on fuel and parking prices in your place of destination. And you get the Volkswagen Media Control package, which allows passengers to control the media system using their smartphones or tablets. So kids in the back, for example, can find their favourite radio station and then they can respond to bellowed adult commands to turn it down. As well as all of that, you get most of the other equipment items that you expect at this price point. So things like 18-inch alloy wheels, auto headlamps and wipers, rear tinted glass, front and rear parking sensors, power folding mirrors, LED rear light clusters and an alarm. Inside there's climate control that also cools the glove box. There's an auto-dimming rear view mirror and a rear seat ski hatch, along with an impressive roster of basic safety equipment that we'll come on to in a few minutes. In addition, there are quite a few other standard Arteon features that you might not expect to be standard on a car in this class. The active info display, for example, that's a 12.3-inch TFT screen that completely replaces the usual instrument binnacle dials with fully customizable menus and information. Now, that sort of setup will cost you a lot more with premium rivals. There's also a superbly supportive Ergo Comfort 6-way power adjustable driver's chair, which, like all the seats in this Arteon, features super soft Nappa leather trim. Other nice to have standard features which would probably cost you more elsewhere include ambient lighting, stainless steel pedals, heated windscreen washer jets, a full-size spare wheel and a third zone for the climate control system so that rear seat folk can separately control the temperature. As for driving stuff, there's the progressive steering setup that was originally developed for the Golf GTI that constantly alters the gearing of the steering depending on your inputs. So going lock to lock takes just 2 turns. That allows you to keep your hands in the same place on the wheel when you're driving on tight, twisty roads. Now, as usual with cars in this class, there's also a driving mode system with selectable settings which allow you to change the throttle feel, the steering feedback and and with the auto box, the gear shift timings too. A Volkswagen setup is called driving profile selection, and it features an extra individual mode that, amongst other things, will allow you to tweak the settings for another standard Arteon feature, the adaptive cruise control. And more on that in a minute. Now, to complete the functionality of the driving mode setup, there's a completely redeveloped version of Volkswagen's DCC, that's Dynamic Chassis Control System, and that works through the various driving profile selection settings, allowing you to tweak the ride quality to suit the way that you want to drive. Now, unlike the other drive features just mentioned, this DCC package is only actually standard if you've gone for an Arteon which is complete with 4Motion 4-wheel drive, but we reckon that's well worth paying extra for on the other models. Also only standard with the 4Motion drive system, but well worth paying extra for, is the XDS electronic differential lock system, which delivers improved traction and handling and helps you to get the power down at speed through tight turns. Enough though on standard Elegance spec. We did though at the beginning mention there was an alternative sportier trim option, R-Line, which gives you a series of cosmetic exterior and interior upgrades, and that'll give your Arteon the more dynamic look and feel that you'll probably want. R-Line spec gets you a styling package, including a redesigned front bumper and gloss black trimming for the front corner air intakes and the rear spoiler. There's also body colour for the door mirrors, there's chrome for the tailpipes, and larger 19-inch Montevideo black alloy wheels. Plus, inside, there's Titan black roof lining and smarter silver rise decorative trim panels, along with R-Line trimming for the steering wheel, the door sills and the front seats, which also feature carbon optic side seat bolsters. So on to extra cost additions available across the range. Now, if you have the funds to go further with infotainment in your Arteon, then the optional feature that your salesperson will probably be most eager to talk about is Volkswagen's flagship Discover Navigation Pro media setup with its larger 9.2-inch colour touchscreen. Now, this includes gesture control, which allows common functions to be activated with just a twirl of your finger. Plus, the package also includes a 64GB hard drive, 3D mapping and a DVD player, along with an extra CarNet Guide and Inform Plus package, which gives you even more online journeying information, covering things like fuel pricing, weather reports and news feeds. In addition, the Pro package includes the voice control functionality that costs extra on the ordinary 8-inch Discover navigation setup. Now, if you specify this extra cost media system, your dealer will also offer you an optional advanced telephone connection package, which will give you a storage compartment in the front center armrest with an integrated USB socket for phone charging, plus your handset will be connectable to the vehicle's external aerial for improved call reception. And other options. Well, let's start with the driving stuff. Many Arteon buyers will want the head-up display, and if you have paid extra for either a rear view camera or even better, the 360-degree surround view camera setup, you can also add on Volkswagen's Park Assist system, which can automatically steer you into the tightest spaces, whether they're parallel or perpendicular to the carriageway. And now, if you do a lot of highway work and you appreciate even more subdued levels of cruising refinement, then you might also want to tick the box for the acoustic pack, which will give you sound insulating laminated glass for the side windows and the rear screen, plus additional sound insulation too. Other extra cost niceties include a heated windscreen, a panoramic glass roof, a heated steering wheel, heated rear seats and keyless entry functionality that comes either on its own or as part of a package that includes a powered tailgate that you can open with a swipe of your foot beneath the bumper. Now, if you want to spoil yourself, you might want to tick the box for one of the front seat upgrade options. There's a basic package that very affordably adds 4-way lumbar support and a massage function to the driver's seat, or you could spend more and along with both of those things you could upgrade that seat with 14-way powered adjustment, or you could upgrade both the front chairs with 12-way powered adjustment. If you're ticking boxes and someone else is paying, then don't forget to also add the optional Dynaudio Confidence Sound Pack. Now that gives you a thumping 700-watt, 11-speaker, 16-channel sound system. As for aesthetics, well, unless you want your Arteon with solid grey or white paintwork, you're going to have to pay extra for your chosen paint finish. Now, as usual with Volkswagen models, there's the option of various metallic or pearl effect paint shades, as well as two more exclusive signature colours. We've got the crimson red signature shade here. You might want to look at upgrading the wheels too. There's a range of 18 or 19-inch designs, plus there are 20-inch rims that we would suggest you only specify if your car already has the DCC dynamic chassis control system to smooth out the ride. If you want to personalise the cabin, then you'd be pleased to find that alternative inlays are available at no extra cost. Either aluminium fine line or, if you like a bit of wood around you, silver birch. As for practicalities, well, we want to look at the usual mud flaps and carpet mats and the range of roof racks and carriers for things like bicycles, skis and snowboards. There's also the option to specify a useful luggage compartment mat, a luggage restraint net and a swivelling tow bar. On to safety, and this is an area where Volkswagen now claims class leadership with this model. Let's start with the expected stuff. Of course, all Arteons get twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus a driver's knee bag. And in addition, there are ISOFIX child seat fastenings, a tyre pressure loss indicator and anti-whiplash front head restraints. In addition, across the range, the Volkswagen brand has installed a clever automatic post-collision braking system. This will automatically brake the car down to 6 miles an hour after a collision. So if, say, someone hits you and, understandably, you go to pieces, the car will automatically sort itself out. On top of all this, there's ESC stability control, an ASR traction control system, and another electronic differential lock system. This EDL setup there to facilitate smooth starts on split friction surfaces, say if one side of the car is on wet leaves, for example. What else? Well, there's ABS braking, of course, and panic stops will be advertised to following motorists by automatically activating hazard warning lights. Hill hold assist stops you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions, and there's also an active bonnet, the rear edge of which rises instantly to minimise head injuries in the nightmare scenario of an impact with a pedestrian or a cyclist. We should also mention that the CarNet security and service package, which is incorporated into both the Discover infotainment systems, now this provides an e-call service that automatically alerts the emergency services should the airbags go off in an accident. There's also a full roster of more sophisticated camera-driven standard safety stuff. ACC, Adaptive Cruise Control, is standard, and it has a predictive feature that draws on navigation data to anticipate road conditions and traffic flow. The Arteon's lane assist feature will sound a warning if you drift out of your lane on the highway, while its front assist system will scan the road ahead as you drive for potential accident hazards and warn you if one's detected and automatically brake if necessary. Those front assist sensors are also used as part of a proactive occupant protection system that senses when an impact's imminent and then braces the car to better withstand it by instantly closing the windows. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, the LED headlamps automatically dip themselves at night, and there's a driver alert system that monitors your driving reactions for drowsiness and which will prompt you to stop for a restorative coffee if lethargy is detected. At urban speeds, you have the backup of city emergency braking, which works at up to 19 miles an hour and which boosts brake pressure if required to help prevent a collision. This setup also includes pedestrian monitoring, which specifically searches for pedestrians who might be about to step out in front of you and, if it's necessary, can initiate braking to avoid them. There is a speed limiter too that you can set for town use, but even cleverer is the standard speed assist feature. Now, this uses road sign recognition and navigation data to recognise speed limits, and if it's set, automatically adjusts your speed to meet them. So use that system and you will never get a speeding ticket at the wheel of an Arteon. If, like most buyers of this car, you go for a variant that's fitted with DSG automatic transmission, you'll also get standard traffic jam assist, which allows this Volkswagen to drive itself in low-speed traffic queues at up to 37 miles an hour, using the previously mentioned lane assist technology to keep the car in lane. Now, that sounds futuristic, but if you regularly have to commute in stop-and-go traffic, it's a feature you'll really come come to depend on. If you want to go even further with camera-driven safety provision, your dealer will offer you two further options. Cleverest, perhaps, is the Emergency Assist package. Now, this uses the adaptive cruise control system we mentioned earlier, and it works on the move to sense a situation where the driver has stopped operating the controls. Perhaps he or she has been taken ill, for example. Now, if that's the case, then after a series of warnings, the electronics will gradually move the car into the left-hand lane and bring it to a safe, controlled stop, all the while flashing hazard warning lights to alert following motorists. Now, the other optional safety package, Side Assist Plus with Rear Traffic Alert, incorporates two features: a blind spot monitor that warns you if you're about to pull out to overtake when there's a vehicle in your blind spot, and a Rear Traffic Alert feature which warns you of oncoming traffic when you're reversing out of a space. Throughout this test, we've remarked on the advantages of this Arteon's extra size in comparison to its obvious class rivals, but there is a downside to that, of course, and that's weight. Sure enough, in a Gran Turismo market segment where the average diesel-powered Audi A5 Sportback only weighs a fraction over 1.5 tons, this Volkswagen does seem a little on the portly side when you consider that the scales register a curb weight which is around 130 kilos more, and that is quite possibly the combined weight of a car full of passengers. Now, you'd think that that would have a reasonably significant impact on running cost returns. Well, let's see. In analysing the figures, let's kick off with the diesels. The unit that most will be considering is the mid-range 2-litre TDI 190 PS unit, which manages 61.4 mpg and 111 grams per kilometre with manual transmission. In comparison, an Audi A5 Sportback with the same engine would give you 64.2 miles per gallon and 108 grams per kilometre. An arrival BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe 420D could manage 67.3 miles per gallon and 111 grams per kilometre. In other words, the efficiency penalty to own the Volkswagen isn't quite as big as perhaps we thought it would be. And you'll do a bit better, of course, if you go for an Arteon with a slightly feebler 150 PS 2-litre TDI unit. Here the figures are 65.7 mpg and 112 grams per kilometre of CO2. That's enough to deliver a relatively low first-year road tax figure of £140 and a benefit-in-kind tax rate of 24%, which means an inland revenue bill of £3,138 for higher-rate taxpayers. Whichever one of the single-turbo TDI engines you go for, the quoted readings will fall by about 5% if you specify your car with DSG automatic transmission. Those who go for a DSG version of the 2-litre TDI 190 PS version also have the option of 4-motion four-wheel drive. In that case, the returns fall to 55.4 mpg and 134 grams per kilometre. As for this top 2-litre by TDI 240 PS 4-motion derivative, the figures are 47.9 miles per gallon and 152 grams per kilometre. Had enough figures yet? Well, hopefully not, because still got to give you the readings that relate to TSI petrol power. Now, earlier we mentioned that should you be interested in a green pump-fueled Arteon, it probably makes sense to try to stretch up from the entry-level 1.5-litre 150 PS engine to the 2-litre 190 PS unit. This larger power plant is, after all, still able to deliver a really pretty acceptable set of returns. It manages 47.1 mpg and 135 grams per kilometre of CO2. That's in the only DSG Auto guise that's on offer. If you can afford the top 2-litre TSI 280 PS 4-motion flagship model, the figures are 38.7 mpg and 164 grams per kilometre. Helping with all those readings are all the usual eco-minded features you'd now expect to see on a car of this kind. Regenerative battery charging to reclaim energy that would otherwise be lost under braking, a start-stop system to cut the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights, and sleek aerodynamics that see this design registering a wind-cheating drag factor of up to 0.26 CD. Now, if your Arteon is an automatic, you'll also get the benefit of Volkswagen's latest DSG transmission technology too, which includes a coasting function, which at cruising speeds will disconnect the gearbox, leaving the engine to idle until you next need it. Of course, in achieving optimum running cost returns, the driver will need to do his or her part. To help with that, there is a gear change recommendation feature in the instrument binnacle here. And as part of the driving profile selection system, there's a selectable eco setting which focuses all the car's systems on ultimate frugality. That's just the start though. Across the range, the centre dash infotainment screen includes the Think Blue Trainer in its car section, and that's a display that gives you 3 circular dials which will help with different areas of driving efficiency. The centre one has 2 blue arcs in its outer ring, and you have to stay within these by braking and accelerating carefully. If you do, you'll achieve a higher so-called blue driving score, rated on a scale of 0 to 100 and shown in the left-hand circle, or graphically via a separately selectable blue score overview. Do well here, and the average fuel consumption figure shown in the right-hand circle will of course rise, and a touch of this round graphic will take you to a graph showing your average fuel consumption over the last 30 minutes. There's also an option for accessing a series of Think Blue fuel-saving tips, though to be frank, some of these are, well, really rather blindingly obvious. Things like think ahead when driving and drive in the highest possible gear. As part of the standard active info display TFT instrument binnacle screen, you can also select an efficiency branded set of virtual gauges which duplicate the centre and right hand dials of the Think Blue Trainer screen and bring those right into your line of sight as you drive. Can you be bothered with all this? Well, if you can't, it's no good complaining that the quoted running cost figures don't match those you actually achieve. Now, the other cost-related facts surrounding this Volkswagen, though, are rather more straightforward. You wouldn't expect an aspiring premium brand model to achieve residual values quite as high as those of the established players, but nevertheless, the Volkswagen contender doesn't do too badly. Experts' quick car cost reckon that after 3 years and 60,000 miles, a volume 2-litre TDI 150 PS DSG Arteon would be worth around 34.7% of its original asking price. To give you some perspective on that, comparable Mercedes C-Class and Jaguar XE models achieve 35.2% and 39% respectively. And we should give you a feel for the potential insurance costings too. Diesel ratings run from Group 22E for an entry-level 2-litre TDI 150 PS, rising to Group 32E for this top 2-litre bi-TDI 240 PS 4Motion variant. In the petrol range, the 2-litre TSI 190 PS model is rated at Group 26E, while the top 2-litre TSI 280 PS 4Motion derivative rates at Group 32E. As for servicing, well, as usual with Volkswagen models, there's a choice of either fixed or flexible maintenance packages. And you'll choose the fixed approach if you cover less than 10,000 miles a year. And with this, the car will typically be looked at every 12 months. Now, if your daily commute is more than 25 miles and your Arteon will regularly be driven on longer distance journeys, then you'll be able to work with the flexible regime. And that can see you travelling up to 18,000 miles between garage visits or every 2 years, whichever is soonest. The TDI engines that many customers will choose, like most modern diesel power plants, get a selective catalytic reduction filter to cut down on nitrous oxide, and as with similar rival units, are designed around the injection of a urea-based solution called AdBlue into the exhaust gas stream to help clean up the emissions. The liquid used is stored in a 12-litre tank that's mounted at the rear beneath the boot, and this will need topping up as part of regular servicing. What else? Well, if you're considering the most powerful petrol or diesel variants, bear in mind that almost any significant extra cost feature that you add will take the value of your car over £40,000, and that means you'll be liable for the £310 a year road tax supplement that's applicable on cars priced over that figure. And warranties, well, the standard package is 3 years and 60,000 miles. Can't really see why Volkswagen couldn't extend that mileage limit to 100,000 miles, because that is what's on offer with its mechanically very similar LCV models. Doing that, though, wouldn't give Volkswagen dealers so much of an opportunity to sell extended warranty packages. There's one for 4 years and 75,000 miles, or if you plan to see a bit more of the world in your Arteon, there's a 5-year, 90,000 mile package. Whatever your decision, your car will come with 3 years of pan-European roadside assistance, and that has no mileage restriction. The paint mold warranty, that lasts for 3 years, and as you'd expect, this model is protected by a 12-year anti-corrosion guarantee. There's lots to like here, providing you're admiring of the looks and you don't care that people might think you couldn't afford a BMW. Now, unlike Ford, Volkswagen's done more than just throw wood and leather at an existing medium-range model in its efforts to create a genuinely premium mid-sized executive contender. There's proper cutting-edge technology here, and it's been beautifully packaged. Forget the Passat comparisons that rather put premium segment people off this car's CC model predecessors. An Audi A4 or A5 actually has more in common with a Passat than this Arteon does, and no one ever looked down their nose at one of those. Though mainstream variants of this Volkswagen may not save you anything over established mid-size models of that sort, they offer you an arguably better looking car with considerably greater interior space and significantly more equipment. There are also media connectivity and high-tech safety features here that you simply can't get from brands like Audi and BMW in this sector. Of course, there are a few things that also go with Arteon ownership that you might not like quite so much. For a start, you'll certainly be paying quite a lot of money to make a statement about just how independently minded you are, and in return you'll be getting a car that isn't as dynamically adept as its obvious rivals, nor is it quite as efficient, and it may not hold on to its value quite as well either. Still, if you take the view that the deal you're more likely to get up front will compensate for that, and that what this car lacks when it comes to driving on its door handles, it more than makes up for with exemplary transcontinental style cruising ability, well, you could well remain an enthusiastic Arteon convert, and we'd understand it if you were. In summary, should you be undecided between the mid-sized and full-sized executive segments and want something practical and spacious, yet with more style and individuality than is available from the usual business class suspects in these categories, then the Arteon could well be a perfect choice. Style knows no brand boundaries, and if you doubt that, you need to try this car.